Not, not every shadow is cast by the living. Tonight we're diving into a story that blurs the line between the world of the living and the dead. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or just someone who enjoys a good chill before bed, this tale will leave you questioning what might be lurking just beyond the veil. Turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready, because this is a ghost story you won't forget. You'd think after 40 years of marriage I'd know every nuance of my husband, the way he furrows his brow when he's pretending not to care, the tiny theatrical sigh he lets out when the coffee's gone cold, the particular cadence of his complaints, always gentle, never meant to sting. Don was a professional kvetch, and I loved him for it. 2 weeks ago, he vanished while working in Pisgah National Forest, senior wildlife biologist, tracking a family of red wolves. Didn't radio in that night. The search party combed ridges and hollows until they told me to prepare for the worst. 10 days later, I got the call I'd been praying for. He'd been found at a truck stop in Brevard, an ambulance, an ER, hypothermia that should have killed him. 20 pounds lighter, scratched and worn in ways neither of us could explain. He couldn't remember anything. They kept him under observation for a few days. The doctors called it traumatic amnesia, a protective shutting down of memory. Dr. Weiss, his psychiatrist, was kind and patient and said the same thing. Memory returns for most people. Give it time, which is fair, but there are things time doesn't make easier to explain. Don used to complain about the mattress, about the neighbors, about the decaf my sister swore was coffee. That man could complain at a sunset. When he came home, he didn't complain. Not once. He watched reruns, a TV he'd always scorned, sat like a statue for hours, and let the world pass without that tiny essential noise that had belonged to him for decades. I told myself it was the brain healing. I told myself I was exhausted. I told myself 100 small mercies for which I had no evidence. Then the sleepwalking started, or at least that's what the doctor suggested. I caught him in the kitchen in the middle of the night, mouthing words without a sound, his face slack and unconvincing in the dim light. I saw him standing at the tree line, rain soaking through his jacket, staring into the dark, like someone trying to remember a language he once spoke. I followed him once, from the back porch, heart inside my throat, and watched him stand with his palms at his sides, like a man rehearsing a role. I nagged, I fussed, I cried into my coffee. Dr. Weiss adjusted his meds. We all made allowances. The family was patient, even relieved. It's the meds, his sister said. It'll pass. For a little while, I believed her. Then the call came from Mr. Hanley, Don's boss. My stomach tipped like a boat. They'd found him in a ravine near Laurel Gap. Heavily injured. No clothing. Exposure. He'd been dead some time. The coroner's call was a sequence of words that left hollow spaces in my chest, 40 miles from his assigned sector. Broken leg. Exposure. If he'd been dead, who had been living in my house for 11 days? I should have been numb. Instead, I went home and found a man at the bathroom sink, naked, sweating, contorting like something trying to come out of a too tight coat. His back to me, the line of his shoulders familiar, the hair at his nape, the small careless scar on his left thumb where he'd cut himself on the canoe in '98. When he turned, the face in the mirror was mine. My scream was the sound people hear in movies, stretched and useless. The thing that had been wearing Don's body pivoted and threw itself through the bathroom window, as if the glass were nothing. It moved wrong, the hips too wide for his old frame, the shoulders pulling at an odd angle, the joints making noises like dry twigs. It ran into the woods, and, as it passed the tree line, something about its outline shivered, not unlike heat over pavement. Later, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to piece together what could possibly make sense. Sleepwalking, sleep-talking, the brain's evasions. Maybe it had been a series of misunderstandings. Maybe grief removes all certainty, and we stitch reality back together with the flimsiest thread. But when I wrote that last post here, when I told you I'd be going away to my sister's in Spokane, something else had already occurred to me. Small things, stupid things, the sort of details you only notice when you're trying not to fall apart. Don never liked blue M&Ms. He liked his steak medium rare, no ketchup. He left his socks in a particular pile by the back door. When he'd come home from the hospital the first night, he'd peeked in the pantry before saying hello, like a reflex. These were habits, the subtle punctuation of a life lived with someone else. Over the last week, whatever had been in my house mimicked the broader strokes of his life and got the details wrong. It laughed with the wrong inflection. It paused in conversation in places Don never would. It stood at the sink and mouthed words people do in practice. The ventriloquist's act I'd seen that first night. Sometimes, in certain light, its smile cut too wide. I didn't know what to do. Call the police and tell them someone was impersonating my dead husband and wearing my face. The sane police report would read like dementia and grief. The other one would read like a horror story. So I packed a bag and told myself a lie. I go to Spokane, and when I returned, I'd wake up and all of it would be explainable. That's what we do. We choose explanations because they are less dangerous than admission. At the funeral arrangements, I kept glancing at the windows. When people said my name, I answered. When they asked if I wanted help with the obituary, I shook my head and managed a polite, "No thank you." I wrote and rewrote the same paragraph until it meant nothing. On the morning I was supposed to leave, I lingered in the driveway. The house lay quiet except for the whisper of rain on the eaves. I heard a chuckle then, thin and pleased. It came from the trees. It sounded like me. Not the way I laugh, the way I used to laugh, small and behind my hand when Don told a bad joke. This was hollowed out, a sound rearranged around something that had studied me for a week and learned my cadence well enough to copy it. It knew which notes would land. I didn't run toward it. I didn't call out. Instead, I walked back to the porch, took off my keys, and set them in a place Don would always look, the table by the window, right where he would see them when he returned from the woods. Because if this thing could mimic my husband, maybe it could be fooled. Maybe it liked props. Maybe if I left the smallest part of myself on the table, it would be content to keep pretending for a while longer. I locked the door behind me and drove to Spokane, the rain flattening the world into a watercolor smear. As I pulled out of the driveway, another laugh floated from the tree line. This one brighter, higher, exactly like mine when I was startled and delighted. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I felt something small and terrible uncoil inside my chest. For the first time since Don disappeared, I didn't tell myself a comforting truth. I understood then. Whatever had come home with him didn't want to be him. It wanted to be us. I'm sitting in my sister's kitchen now, the radio low, the kettle hissing. I should be grieving in a tidy, comprehensible way. Instead, the thing in the woods has my keys and my laugh and probably a new set of habits to practice. If you don't hear from me again, don't assume I forgot how to complain. Know instead that someone out there knows how my voice sounds when I say, "For Christ's sake, Don," and copies it with a little too much affection. Tonight, before I left, I turned the house key in my hand one last time. It felt good, ordinary. I put it in my pocket. As I drove away, the tree line behind the house brightened with a laugh that sounded like me. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't answering to a name at all. It was learning.
Make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any stories you would like to share with us, our email is in the description. Let's continue.
This happened back in October 2022, close to Halloween. My girlfriend and her friend have owned a hair salon since the end of 2020. They usually handle Instagram posts, appointments, and everything related to social media with an iPhone that they use exclusively for the business. Since it was close to Halloween, they decided to make an altar inspired by the Day of the Dead at the salon. Context: the Day of the Dead, Dia de Muertos, is a celebration in Mexico where you set up an altar with pictures of relatives who have passed away, along with food offerings and similar items. It is believed that deceased relatives return in spirit to taste the foods they enjoyed while alive. If you've seen the movie Coco, you might know what I mean. The day they put the altar in the salon, everyone went home as usual. She came home and we did our normal routine. I went to sleep. And because she always has trouble falling asleep, she continued watching series on Netflix. Somewhere around 2 to 3 a.m., she woke me up frantically. My first thought was that she had been watching a horror movie or something. She couldn't even speak a full sentence and was pointing at her phone. I hugged her until she calmed down for about 10 minutes, and then she started to say that she had received a FaceTime call from the phone at the salon. She said she was watching TV when she started to receive the request. Since it was 3 a.m., she thought it very unlikely that her friend, the salon co-owner, was calling. However, because there were times when they stayed late to restock materials, she thought maybe her friend was still at the salon and had an emergency. When she accepted the FaceTime, she only saw the ceiling. She said her friend's name, thinking she had made the call, but nothing appeared on screen. Only the ceiling and the red nightlight they leave on. She had an eerie feeling and ended the FaceTime. Since they have security cameras at the salon, she opened the app on her phone to see what was happening. At that point, she thought a thief might have broken in. As soon as she checked the cameras, there was no one there. She rewound the camera footage to the exact moment she was called, and you could only see the phone power on by itself, and placed the FaceTime call to her. That's when she lost it and woke me up. She said she couldn't explain how the phone had a security lock with a password known only to her and her friend, or how whoever or whatever was manipulating the phone chose her contact and made the FaceTime call. There's no logical explanation for that sequence. The next day, she told everyone at the salon what had happened, and they were all in shock because there was no way the phone did all that by itself at 3 a.m. None of them had ever heard of receiving a call from no one. That was the first and last year they used a Day of the Dead theme at the salon. They get goosebumps whenever they remember what happened. Someone suggested it was because the altar invited the dead to wander through the place. 3 years have passed, but we still remember that night. Has anyone else had a similar experience?
Thanks for tuning in. Watch another video if you dare.